This is Upside Down in the Middle of Nowhere, chapter 27 and 28. We slogged through the soupy water, one foot in front of the other, not even knowing if we were walking in a straight line, and every time I took a step, I'd scrunch up my toes to keep my boots from sliding off my achy, wet feet. I tried to concentrate on counting my steps to keep from thinking about what might have been lurking up in that thick, nasty water with us. Then I started to see all the people. At first, it was two or three walking together, making their way through the muck. Then I seen more and more survivors like us. It was strange. Never in my whole life had I seen people coming together in the same place at the same time and not even saying a word. There was no hey or what's up or hi, how you doing? And helicopters buzzed in the air, but it couldn't hide the sounds of the sloshing water, babies crying, dogs barking, and mamas sniffling. The heaviness up inside my own self was growing bigger and harder to carry every time another soggy, sad somebody joined our growing group, and it was like all the sorrows coming together was turning into its own somebody. Everyone had the same look, scared, confused, hungry, and wore down. Mr. Oscar Dupree had given us the foam cooler that for one of the twins to ride in, and Celie was so scared her book sack was going to get wet, she took it off and laid it down under Kayla in the styrofoam boat. Celie's job, besides staying upright on her own 2 feet, was to help push the cooler holding our little sister while I pulled, and every time I looked down at Kayla, I was about a hop skip from losing it. The girl was all smiling and happy like she was having a good old time. It even said, go faster a couple of times like she was on a ride at the church carnival. I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I had more than one thought of wishing I were small enough to ride in the cooler and let someone else worry about hauling my butt through the water while I sat dry and happy. The thoughts didn't stick around long because I was too busy pulling the dumb styrofoam boat and switching from my right arm to my left every few minutes. I dragged my stupid heavy feet through the slime, heavy on the account of the ridiculous ugly boots, Mima's boots, heavy because they didn't fit. Didn't fit because Mima didn't have enough sense to find shoes to fit, and I wiped my idiot tears and snot from my shoulder. Mima should have known they'd fill up with water. She shouldn't have died in the attic, and everything was so heavy. Celie did the best she could pushing the boat cooler, but the ground up under the water was uneven and slick, and we looked like we were drunk the way we kept swaying with this way and that. I was fixing to ask Mama how much further when my foot slid into a hole in the ground and went sideways, and I stumbled, and my face was headed for the water. I grabbed a hold of the side of the cheap boat cooler with both my hands to keep from falling, and a chunk of white styrofoam broke off and sent the boat thing into a rocking wobble. And Kayla squealed and clapped, and Celie froze. Mama reached for Kayla's arm too slow. Kayla tripped right out of the water, making a plop sound like my birthday puppy did when she spun herself off the roof and went face first into the goo water stew. Me, Mama, and Celie all scrambled at the same time, but knocking each other down, trying to rescue her. Kayla, Mama shrieked. I grabbed a hold of her flailing arms and yanked fast and hard. Lord have mercy, Mima sighed in my head. Her voice was so clear and real, I turned my head expecting to see her standing right there next to me, but she wasn't there. There was no Mima, no Daddy, no Georgie, just us. Me, Mama, Celie, forever wheezing Colleen, and soaked to the bone, lucky to be alive, Kayla. It was like the cooler had a mind of its own, and it dumped my baby sister out, then went right back to sitting as nice as it could be with Celie's book sack tucked all neat and snug at the bottom. Kayla coughed and made a gagging sound, and the disgusting water spewed from her mouth. A tiny bit even dripped out of her nose. She was flapping her arms like a baby bird fixing to fly, and I went to remembering the broken bird family in the nest on top of Daddy's truck. A cold, fast shiver ran from the top of my head to my toes. Kayla, you okay? Mama cried. Behind the river of tears and trembling lips, I'd seen something I thought I'd never see in my mama's face. The soft around her eyes was gone, and her face was all squished into the side of Kayla's plump, wet cheeks, and she was staring at me and not looking at me at the same time. The sight of her fright had me too scared to speak. My insides jumped when she took a big gulp of air and said, First, Georgie, now Kayla? She squeezed her eyes shut. This is Henry and Sheldon all over again. Her voice drifted off into a whimper. I was nauseous, and whatever was happening, it was nothing like what happened to my dead uncles. Tears fell, and I opened my mouth to say sorry, but Mama spoke first. What is wrong with you? She whispered, the hateful words that cut through me like no other kind of hurt felt before. Mama ain't never spit out words at me like that. She like she did just then. She glared at me with teary eyes, and then just like that, she turned away. I stood there blinking with my mouth half open and a sorry that Mama never heard. It was my fault that Kayla got dumped in the disease-filled water, and I knew all of it was my fault. Chapter 28. I struggled to hold on to Colleen and watch what was left of my family walk on ahead of me while I stood there missing Daddy and Mima and Georgie. My brother would have found some way or another to make me smile, and Mima would have understood. She always understood me. And Daddy would have known what to do. He'd carry the little ones and take the weight away. And Armani, it's dry, Celie happy hollered. Sure enough, I watched Mama set Kayla down on the dry concrete, not a speck of water that I could see. Celie was staring at me, waving her hand for me to come on, and I walked to dry land and emptied my boots. We walked at least a block before we came to the corner. Sweet Jesus, Mama mumbled when she seen the sight waiting there for us. Her words were a perfect way of saying exactly what flew through my mind. There were people everywhere. It was the Superdome, and it was a giant fire anthill that all the people around it were the ants, busy ants climbing over each other, moving every which way, carrying whatever they could without leaving their hill, the dome. Me and my brother and sisters all scooched up real close to Mama, barely giving her enough room for her legs to move. And Kayla was so tucked up under the back of Mama that sometimes when she took a step, her chubby head would disappear altogether up the bottom of her dress. My mind was reeling, and all I could think of was Daddy and Georgie and Tay had to be in that sea of people somewhere, and thumps of excitement tapped my chest. I know I could find you, Daddy. I was determined to find him. Where are you? I looked in every direction at the same time. He'd be easy to find. He was tall and handsome. There were too many people, though. My mouth got dry and made a smack sound every time I opened it, and sweat ran down the top of my head and got in my eyes. Panic knocked with loud beats up in my head, and I was going to be impossible to find Daddy and Georgie without standing on a fireman's ladder and shouting at the top of my lungs for the two George Curtises to please raise their hand. Mama had the look of understanding too, but she kept on searching every which way but up. Step aside, coming through, barked two huge army guys brushing past us, and they were wearing National Guard uniforms like Uncle T-Bone had on when he first got back from Afghanistan. But I don't remember my uncle carrying around a big old gun like them soldiers. They stopped smack dab in front of us and set a large cardboard box down. I couldn't stop staring at the gigantic real guns. Ma'am, one of the army guys said, handing Mama bottles of water. She took them and gave one to each of us kids and keeping one for herself. Thank you, Mama said, wiping her dry, puffy eyes. I need first aid, my son. A woman shoved Mama out of the way, and the soldiers weren't even paying attention to us no more. Him and the other soldier were yelling at the thirsty people who came running up, crying and pushing and cussing and begging for a bottle of water. Celia took a step towards the stirred-up crowd with her bottle held out like she was fixing to give it to someone, and I yanked back her arm. Armani! Shut up, Celia, is all I said. Mama gathered us up under her arms the best she could and steered away from the crazies, and babies were laid out all over the place, some sound asleep, some lying on the mushy ground, rolled into little dirty, sweaty balls. Most of them didn't have on nothing but a diaper, and every time I sucked in even a tiny bit of stale air, it smelled thick with sweat and stinky canal water and dirty diapers. Mamas cradled their children, crying and mumbling, and men walked around with mad looks one minute, holding their own heads in their hands the next. I twitched with fright every time someone wailed or hollered out. My whole self was a bundle of nerves, and even my eyes were jumpy. We slogged along with Mama stuck to her like white on rice, never more than an inch from her side. Daddy, Georgie, Tay, where are y'all? And I fixed to trying on to find them. I didn't notice the dead woman till I was already gone and tripped over. She was lying there shoved up to the side of a brick wall like yesterday's trash, and my heart took to racing. The shaking in my body moved, the rattle in my head down my arms and settled in my fingers, and I tried to reach for my dang boot that I had fell off during the act of tripping, but my brain wouldn't let my wobbly hand reach no further toward the boot on account of the fact that Meemaw's old, ugly, flowered clodhopper was resting right up in the dead woman's armpit. Don't look, Armani, don't look. Celia slammed into my chest, burying her face and squeezing the life out of me at the same time, and I patted her on the back. It's okay, Celia, I ain't looking. But the truth is I couldn't stop looking. I knew who the person was laying there with flies in her eyes, and I knew as soon as I seen that filthy, long, gypsy-looking dress, it was that woman outside Pete's with the messed-up dogs. I couldn't move, and I think I might have stood there like a dummy staring all day long if Mama hadn't reached up in front of me and snatched the boot, slapping it firm in my hand all in one quick move. Mama had the look of nothing on her face. She didn't look mad or scared or sad. She didn't even look grossed out by having someone remove her child's rubber boot from the armpit of a dead woman. The boot the few days prior had belonged to her mama, who was now lying up in the hot, wet attic. That's the only way I know how to describe what I'd just seen then on Mama's face, the look of nothing. I slipped the boot back on and took to walking with my head down, stealing looks into the crowd every couple of steps so that I wouldn't accidentally pass by Daddy, Georgie, or Tay.